welcome. And thank you so much for joining the World Affairs Council of Connecticut today to discuss the cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline. We're going to be talking about DarkSide, ransomware, and U.S. critical infrastructure vulnerabilities. So today we are thrilled to have with us a special guest, Arthur House. Art is an internationally recognized cybersecurity expert, former Cybersecurity Risk Officer for the State of Connecticut, and a senior advisor for the World Affairs Council, as well as a very good friend of the Council. And we are thrilled to have Art with us today. So Art, thank you, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's always great to be with you.
For everyone out there, my name is Amanda, VP of Programs at the Council, and we are going to kick off this conversation with Arthur House and Megan Torrey, CEO of the World Affairs Council. So Megan, over to you.
Thanks, Amanda. And Art, it's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Hi there, my friend.
How are you? So Art is not only a very beloved member of our board of directors, but he is also one of the board of directors that can appreciate my love of the Red Sox. So he's extremely well positioned to be with us today because, as Amanda mentioned, you were our state's chief cybersecurity officer, but you were also head of our public utilities regulatory authority. So when we're talking about the Colonial Pipeline and critical infrastructure, we are so happy that you could be with us today. So let's start sort of at the beginning. So Art, can you sort of tell us from a cybersecurity perspective what happened with the Colonial Pipeline attack and what's going on today?
Yeah, sure. We start with the fact that there's a really blurred set of lines between organized crime and international espionage and covert operations. I remember Roy Camphausen last week. You posed a question and it was a good answer that the Chinese don't like surprises as much. They have a long-term strategy. They favor stability. The Russians are just the opposite. They love messing things up. They love spontaneous opportunities. And when they can poke the West or cause disruption or chaos of some sort, they love to do it. And they got a bunch of actors. They got crazy names like Advanced Persistent Threat 29, the Dukes, Cozy Bear, Yttrium, and now DarkSide. DarkSide appears to be a full service. I mean, they both do it themselves and they're a wholesale operation too. They develop ransomware, they sell it to others. And the FBI has confirmed that DarkSide compromised the Colonial Pipeline network. So it took about 100 gigabytes of data from Colonial, threatened to leak it. They're known for their stealth and their skill. They do their homework. DarkSide is a serious operation. They know their target. They know the weaknesses of their target. They know what technologies they use. They also tend to respond to questions at Q&A forums in Russian. Now, you say, well, why does Russia allow this? Well, the rules of the road. I mean, this golden rule in Russia is don't you ever think about trying to mess around with us, with Russia. You're there, we'll let you operate, but don't ever turn around and come after us or we'll fry you. So they're out there doing mischief. A couple things, they do not want these groups to cross a red line if they can perceive what it is. No acts of war, don't get us into war. But if you go out there and mess things up and if you make some money, that's fine. And frankly, they're also known for paying bribes. When these organizations go out and make money, they pass it along through the Russian system. So what took place was very simply an attack. One of the things, and I'll wait for you to ask more questions, but one of the things that bothers me is that Colonial never told the U.S. government that it had been attacked. It still hasn't. I mean, they found out about it, but there should be rules of the road here. We should know when there is an attack, when it's shut down, who did it, what happened. And right now, yesterday, the acting CISA, the Cybersecurity Information Agency in Department of Homeland Security, testified before the Senate Homeland Security Committee that Colonial did not contact CISA after the attack and still has not shared important technical data about it. So we've got to look at rules of the road. We have to talk about how private sector works with the government, what should be reported when. The good news is that it appears to be subsiding. They appear to be getting back online and back up to operations as before.
So it is my understanding that DarkSide has been a known entity for a while, in that, companies could have done things to sort of prevent, right? So it's sort of cyber offense. And I know that for a while, you've been publicly speaking about the Colonial Pipeline as a case study. Can you tell us about that case study?
Well, yeah, and I'm a little frustrated about it. Yes, a couple things. Number one, when I first became Chief Cybersecurity Risk Officer in Connecticut, Department of Homeland Security and FEMA and others had a conference in Rhode Island, and it was called, I think, Operation Liberty. And they brought in the full range of suppliers, distributors, emergency responders, and so on. And the postulate of that case was a cutting of the gas pipeline coming into New England. We generate half of our electricity by natural gas coming by pipeline. The other major vulnerability is this Colonial Pipeline, 5,500 miles. They provide a little less than half of all the liquid petroleum, jet fuel, gasoline, heating oil that comes to the East Coast. And yeah, pipelines are less secure than utilities. Now, having said that, anything can be penetrated, anything can be hacked, but pipelines have spent less attention to this. And so, yeah, I've often used the case of, suppose we had Colonial or another pipeline attacked and we did not have access to that fuel. I mean, that could be a very serious case for the United States. Now, having said that, Megan, look, we're lucky. It's May. It's not January and it's not August. I mean, we're not looking at sub-zero temperatures or sweltering with no air conditioning. And it was not a systemic, thorough national security attack. This was a ping. It's let's cause some trouble, let's see if we can make some money, let's disrupt them. But it could have been far more serious. And I hope that by going after Colonial, which could be a huge problem for the United States, we'll start to take it seriously. But what you have to think is, if they can do the pipeline, which I and others have been saying for years, look, it's vulnerable. Yeah. So is the water supply to the city of Los Angeles. So is the distribution of electricity to Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, and Maryland. So is the financial system in New York. Now, I don't know what an act of war is. We don't have rules of the road. But you pile things like that together and shut down a few airports, and you do have an act of war. And so the frustration is that these vulnerabilities have been blatantly well known for years, and yet we still act surprised when the inevitable has happened.
So, I mean, you've been warning against attacks like this. Other experts have been warning against attacks like this. DarkSide it is a known entity. What is it about sort of the leadership of Colonial or organizations and companies like it that sort of, why aren't they responding in mitigating these risks? What's going on?
For one thing, the United States government cannot and does not impose security standards on companies, nor does it provide security for them. Now, very good question. What happens if our livelihood depends on these companies? It's one of the reasons why we in Connecticut have an annual review of the defense capabilities of our public utilities, water, gas, water, natural gas, electricity. And we at least do an annual review and say, how are you doing? We look at their defense capabilities, the consultants they have, the software systems they have, everything they're doing to keep themselves safe. But, this is getting serious. With the SolarWinds attack last December, it exposed the vulnerabilities between software companies and all kinds of government agencies and over 100 private companies. Now, at what point do we say that's public business? If you're going to shut us down and endanger our national security, we the citizens have a right to know about that. I mean, just for example, I remember when I was working for the state, I had a chat once with Governor Malloy, and we were talking about the fact that I told him that some Connecticut towns had been compromised by ransomware. It was fairly simple. They come in and what they want is money, and they'll turn the key and turn you back on. And he hadn't known about it. And he said, how's the system work? Why am I not told? Well, there at that time was no, and there is no rigorous set of systems by which when a ransom attack hits a municipality, there are these 6 steps, for example, have to be taken right away. It's the same at the federal level. And the Colonial was not obligated and still hasn't informed the federal government about what happened. Well, those are gaps. In the modern world, warfare is going to be taken with weapons that succeed in exacerbating vulnerabilities. So we have an interest in tightening up not only our defenses, but our reporting and our ability to respond once an attack takes place.
So you've described that our critical infrastructure is particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks. Can you sort of elaborate on how vulnerable we are, and how does that vulnerability compare to other nations?
Yes, I guess I start this way, that we usually don't realize that anything that can be put on a computer or on the internet can be penetrated. We don't often realize that. Now, there's a lot going on, and it's kind of sensitive to talk about right now, but the fact of the matter is that our intelligence agencies and some of the congressional committees have revealed that the critical infrastructure in the United States has been penetrated. They admit that we also have penetrated other countries. Well, why don't we do something about it? Because, frankly, the intelligence, knowing what nation states and certain rogue actors, such as these who are working with collaboration of nation states, what they're doing, the kind of ransomware they're using, the worms and the penetration sources and methods, how they do it, where they put it, is extremely valuable to us. So the US government intelligence agencies are very hesitant to point out all the penetrations that are in our electric generators, distributors, natural gas, water, because they would be telling the enemy, we know what you're doing, we know how you're doing it, in which case, of course, they'd change. So you have this standoff right now of we have penetrated other countries and they have penetrated us. Now, the problem is the United States is far more vulnerable to, say, electricity disruption than, say, North Korea, just to take an obvious example. And more, the Irans, North Koreas of the world are getting more sophisticated in their ability to attack. And North Korea would be less devastated by an attack on electricity because the entire society uses less electricity. It's not as developed. In the United States, if you were to shut down critical infrastructure in the United States, I mean, we saw in Connecticut just last summer, the outcry after a week of no air conditioning, people got very upset about it. Well, it would also be devastating to our national security. So, yeah, it's a problem. It's out there and it's imminent.
So I want to bring in a question from Ed Lewis. What can be done to protect our interests? Are we in a scenario now where these kinds of cyber attacks are only going to escalate?
Well, good. I like that question. Who posed it?
Ed Lewis.
Ed Lewis. Good question, Ed Lewis. One of the answers to this comes from a colleague I've worked with, and I like a lot, Andy Bachman. Andy and I worked in Ukraine, Black Sea area, and in former Yugoslavia. And Bachman works for the Idaho National Labs. And he took that question and has come up with, he's written a book on it and other things. It's called the Consequence-Driven Cyber-Informed Engineering, called CCE. And his theory is, if it's important to you, if it really is essential to your functioning, do not put it on the computer. Take it off. And what we need to do is reduce or eliminate the digital pathways that attackers can use to reach them. So at a minimum, do that. If you're a company, a government agency, an individual, and you're really in trouble if this information leaks out, corporate secrets, national security information, sensitive things about your payroll or your social security numbers of your employees. So if it's really essential, then look at how one could access that digitally and eliminate or reduce the digital pathways or take it off the computer altogether. Now that sounds extreme. It is extreme, but there is no other way of responding to the dilemma that you pose, Ed. I mean, that's it. If it can be put on a computer, it can be taken off a computer. And we're seeing, I mean, everywhere from the city of Baltimore to Atlanta to hospitals, banks. I mean, everything is being compromised. How longer can the list get before we realize that we are vulnerable? And you ask what you can do. Well, the Bachman CCE is one to look at. It's extreme, but it does respond to your question.
So I know you're familiar with State of the World, so we're going to do what we call the 5 now. So it's a speed round, and I want you to sort of, from your perspective, can you quickly run down the top 5 adversaries, the the U.S. is facing, or where might we expect cyber attacks and ransomware to threaten U.S. infrastructure?
Yeah, the intelligence community has been pretty explicit about this, so anybody who follows the World Affairs Council should not be shocked. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. Now, after that, 30 countries have cybersecurity attack capabilities. And I guess if I had to have the 5, just to answer your question, I would say rogue actors who come from several different countries. And what can they, all right, there they are. Now, the problem, as we've discussed, is that the game right now is all offense. The senior Biden appointees to national security leadership recently, there's a guy I used to work with, and I talked to him and said, how are we doing? And he chuckled and he said, you know, it's just like it used to be. If there were a cyber war between the United States and one of those 5 actors I just mentioned, and you likened it to a soccer game, at halftime, the score would be 394 to 280. In other words, no defense. Either side could score at will. And this is against adversaries, not Russia, not China, but North Korea and rogue actors. And so I just use that phenomenon as an indicator that right now, the whole game is offense. And you don't deter people just the simple fact that we can get you too. That's not an adequate deterrence.
So, Art, another audience question. So what do you perceive as the ultimate objective of cyber attacks? Fear, disruptions, nation state espionage, all of the above, different in every case. What's the ultimate goal?
Well, there are 2 ways. There are some people, some just plain causing us trouble, but it tends to be both money and valuable information. Now, Megan, you're a CEO. One of the things they do is after money. That's why they go after municipalities. They shut you down and they say your systems are locked and out in Bitcoin. They want the money. And that has been repeated. Atlanta absolutely refused to go after, to cooperate with them, but money. The other is sensitive information. For example, there's a group right now, just last week, called Babook. And it's like DarkSide, it's another Russia-linked organization. And in April, they hit the Washington, D.C. Police Department with a ransomware attack. And instead of saying, they downloaded 250 gigabytes, but instead of saying, we'll freeze your systems, what they said was, we now have information on your police informants and whom they work with in the gangs. And we're going to put it out on the internet unless you pay us. Well, obviously, informants get killed. You can imagine what that would do. Not only would it reduce the amount of information that Washington, D.C. police had, but a lot of these people who've been cooperating with them through the years and their allies their lives are in danger. All right, so money is one. The other is the kind of thing that has been linked to the Chinese when they stole close to 2 million personal identifiers of the Office of Personnel Management, of the President's Office of Management and Personnel. They have the Social Security numbers, tax returns, sensitive information, files on people like me and everybody else who's worked in the intelligence community over the last 10, 20 years. And that information could be used for compromise, for bribery, for all kinds of different things. They also know how the systems work. So in sum, long answer, but in sum, it comes down to money and valuable information either of national security or operations that could be of interest to them. Now, intellectual property theft, classically from the Chinese, has also been one. How do you make this product? You can either spend millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in a lot of research trying to develop yourself, or hack into a company and just steal the secret and use it. And that's a third one.
So we have an audience question as well about why aren't there better protections to our cybersecurity systems here in the US? But I think that's also a good opportunity to talk to you about what tools we actually have in the US. What agencies do we have to combat cyber threats to critical infrastructure? And how do they work?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are a country that wants answers. What do you mean this is going on? Fix it. You got elected. I mean, you're in office, for heaven's sakes, fix it. Well, problem is, as I say, offense is easier than defense. And if it can be put on a computer, it's easy to put it on a computer. Then people have trouble saying, well, if it's easy to put it on a computer, then why am I upset by the fact it's easy to take it off the computer? But it is. Now, big picture answer to your question, Megan, is that, look, after 9/11, we set up the Department of Homeland Security. We tried to take the knowledge, the lore of information technology from NSA, the National Security Agency, and apply it domestically to protect ourselves. So we put it in the Department of Homeland Security. And that, of course, has the CISA, the Center for the Cyber Information Security Agency within DHS. Now, it's only been there about 20 years, and we're getting to have it work. That itself has undergone huge disruptions. I mean, its head was fired by President Trump, and the head of DHS was fired by Trump because they cared more about cybersecurity than about the border issues down below. Well, we're getting there. The FBI is in charge of investigating penetrations. The Secret Service has a large role in financial intrusions, as does the FBI. The CISA, the Homeland Security, is looking at rooting these things out. States are almost at square one or two. They're just getting started. If there is a cyber penetration of a town or city, the chances are they do not have sophisticated defense measures against them. Now, the question is, why don't we? Well, you know, how much taxes do you want to pay? I mean, our regulatory agencies that regulate critical infrastructure, our cities, our towns, our states, the federal government, we have developed the computer, but we did not at the same time invest all the resources that would be necessary to protect ourselves, and it would be extremely costly to do so. There are those who say it doesn't matter. If we're vulnerable and we can be shut down and lives can be lost, we got to do it anyway. Well, there you are. There's your public debate on the whole thing.
So we do have another audience question from someone at the University of New Haven, and it's about should the U.S. support our own set of cyber warriors as a hybrid war? And I just want to quickly sort of tell you, Mr. Sanders, to tune in very soon for information on our Global Security Forum. And I know you've played such a big role in our Global Security Forum over the last few years, and in cyber defense has been an issue. And we know that we have National Guard members from the state of Connecticut working on a cyber team right now. But what's your opinion on sort of cyber defense within the DoD?
Well, it's getting there, but it's rudimentary. Yes, you're finding more people in the National Guard, in the Department of Defense, in all of the branches of the armed forces who are spending a lot more time learning about this. So we are developing not only cyber warriors, but cyber defenders. We're doing all we can. And yet still, as that top official said, the score at halftime would be, you know, hundreds of points on both sides. So yeah, of course we should do it, and we're trying to do it. Tomorrow's soldier is going to be increasingly female, increasingly diverse, and increasingly information technology, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity oriented. And we are getting there. So that I would say it is going on. The problem is that the basic vulnerability of the United States is there, and it's not something we like to talk about. Allied to that is our ability to respond when an attack takes place. And by the same token, we are starting to exercise in this area. And people don't want to talk about vulnerabilities, obviously. But cyber attacks can wreak havoc on society. And that's something that we always need to be paying more attention to.
So in your role as the Chief Cybersecurity Officer for the state of Connecticut, you wrote a very comprehensive plan, a cybersecurity plan. Can you tell us the status of that plan and what happened to it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the one I did at Pura still operates. Every year there is an assessment done of the state of cybersecurity in our gas, water, electricity. The statewide plan, it's still there. I think the coronavirus has taken has demanded attention at the expense of a lot of things. The state still is taking action, though. Let me give you three things the state is doing. One, it has consolidated state agency cyber defense capabilities into one central organization, which is a great step forward. Secondly, they're doing enhanced work with the multi-state information sharing analysis center. In other words, information is being distributed more widely. And they're working with CISA, DHS. And the third thing is in Connecticut, the state government is working with the National Guard to assist municipalities when they have security issues and so forth. Now, the plan still exists. It has not been fully implemented, but it is there. And people still care about it. There are these kinds of actions taking place. And I know the governor cares about it. I talk to him about it every so often, and he's very concerned about this. I think there's a lot of things that are not having as much attention as they might have. We might like to pay to them if we weren't paying so much attention to controlling coronavirus and getting the economy relaunched again.
So coronavirus might just be one of our huge vulnerabilities, just globally in general. So I know we're running out of time, but as we end, I sort of want to ask you, what happens next? Do you think this Colonial Pipeline cyber attack is the red flag that we need to really start taking our cyber vulnerabilities and our critical infrastructure seriously? What's next, Art?
I wish I could say yes, but I think no. Look, what does it take? WannaCry was huge. Ukraine was huge. Atlanta, Baltimore. We have had so many. Look at what happened in Texas with the shutdown then. Back then, people asked that same question. Do you believe that now that Texans don't have drinking water and without heat, that'll finally wake us up? This question gets asked every time. And every time people say, gee, I hope so, and then it doesn't. So, the optimist in me says, boy, I hope so. The realist is, no. We are slow to react. Look, Pearl Harbor, 9/11. You look at all of these things until there is a catastrophe. And then when it strikes, we overreact. But no, I think this is probably not large enough to get us to all wake up and say, yes, now we realize how vulnerable we are, and we all need to take collective action to defend ourselves. I wish that were the case.
All right, thank you so much for joining us on State of the World today.
Love it. Thanks for having me.
We'll have to have you back.
And to echo Megan, thank you so much, Art. I was writing down notes. I know that there's more questions coming in through the chat, through email, through Q&A. So there's so much interest, and we're so grateful that you could take the time this week to update us on what's going on right now and to let us know, kind of how we need to think about this and prepare for the future. So thank you so much, Art. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today as well. And until next time.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.